The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Tally Olson. I am back. You are comfortably zoned with me, the Zig Zag Man, in Alameda, California, right across the bay from San Francisco, across the moat from Oakland, in what is arguably the greatest state in the world. I've lived here for 55 years, and my guests may disagree. George Grimm, how are you, sir?
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
You in my life has been just an incredible. It's like having a free psychiatrist writing a book with you. You have been the stabilizer so many times. I'm so grateful for that. And we'll talk about the book that we wrote together a little bit later. I want to talk about the book that you're just completing and publishing. What's the name of it, and what came about that you wrote it?
Yeah, the book is called Forgotten Blue Shirts. It's about the Frank Boucher era New York Rangers from 1940 to 1955. And that was a very interesting time in Ranger history because Frank Boucher had been an original Ranger from 1926. He played for them for about 12 years. In 1940, he became their coach, and he won a Stanley Cup the first year behind the bench. 1940, and
right.
He was up until now, the only other Ranger coach who has won a cup in their first year behind the bench is Mike Keenan in 1994, 54 years later, which every Ranger fan will remember and thank them for. But in 1941, when World War II broke out, that's when everything went downhill. Lester Patrick thought that the NHL was going to close down operations for as long as the war was on, but he was wrong. But he went ahead and he sold a lot of the Rangers minor league players, and he cut off a lot of their minor league contracts, and he only kept the New York Rovers as a farm club. So, and after that, the NHL decided they were going to play. So the Rangers were screwed. They lost players just like every other team, but they didn't have the players to replace them. So they had to play. They had to go out and get and play guys who were either too young, too old, or unfit for military service at the time. And those 4 years they finished in last place 4 years straight, and it was the worst time in Ranger history. But Boucher led them through it the best he could. He did what he could do with what he had, and a few years later, after the war was over, he went out and reconnected with a lot of the minor league teams that Patrick had lost the contracts with, and he rebuilt the Rangers. And in 1950, they got to the finals of the Stanley Cup, and they lost in Game 7 in 2 overtimes to the Detroit Wings when Pete Babando scored on Chuck Marina. And but then Lynn Patrick left the Rangers right after that, so it was a downtime again, and Frank Boucher ended up leaving the Rangers in 1955 after being in the organization since 1926. So he was a real mainstay. He was one of the cornerstones of the franchise back then.
Was his leaving a mutual thing, or Patrick was still running things.
No, Patrick, supposedly Patrick said he didn't want to raise his children in New York. And he took a job coaching a team on the West Coast. But then, the owner of the Boston Bruins, Art Ross, made him an offer he couldn't refuse, and he went and he coached the Boston Bruins. So it's kind of a sore spot with a lot of Ranger fans that he got up and left and ended up with the Bruins, who at that time were one of our major rivals.
I equate that with Leo DeRocher going from the Dodgers to the Giants.
Sure.
Very, very similar thing. I can imagine how the fans felt in an indoor arena.
Yeah.
And New York fans are very capable of showing their emotion.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And, that's what makes it either more difficult to play in New York if you're going bad, and less difficult to play in New York if you're going good. Because
that's right.
Fans that know are very discerning. And I can think of Harry Howell, for instance, who was a pretty good defenseman.
Oh, yeah.
He took a lot of heat from Ranger fans when we were growing up.
They used to say, hit him with your purse, Harry. Because
Right.
Harry wasn't exactly the kind of defenseman that the fans wanted. They wanted somebody who was going to hit people and knock them down. Harry was more of a the one who would ease the guy out of the play, steal the puck away from him, and he would get the job done, but in an altogether different way.
You're right, and that way doesn't appeal to a lot of New Yorkers.
Right.
Aggression is where the word was put in the dictionary from New York, or not just New York, New Jersey, the entire area. There's a marketable difference in the passion in places like Boston, Philadelphia, New York. It's in big league crowds. Come out west, and it's just not the same. Not the same at all.
Yeah, it's pretty laid back, I suppose. Up here in the Northeast, where we had been struggling with these teams. Like the Rangers and the Bruins, they're original 6 teams, and you talk about Philadelphia baseball. They've been in the league for forever. So the fans grew up with these teams. They didn't get moved in with the possibility that they're going to get moved out. They grew up with these teams. This is part of their lives. I mean, when my father took me to my first games at the old Garden, he kind of let me know that this is our team. So get used to it,
kid. And that made all the difference. It's amazing what a little passion thrown in to a young person can do, and how easy it is to develop that under the right circumstances. Your dad was obviously supportive. And that makes a difference too. Wow. One thing leads to another. And what made you start writing originally?
Well, it's a kind of a long story. Growing up, I could never type on a typewriter. I made too many mistakes. But then when we got the word processing on the computers, I could make all the mistakes I want and just backspace and, keep going. And so it made it a lot easier. And there's a guy named Lee Chappelle. He ran the International Goaltenders Union out of a store in Reading, Pennsylvania. And he had a newsletter. called Rebound, and I wrote a story about Eddie Jockman, and he published it. And I kind of like seeing my name and my work in print. I can't lie about that. So then a couple of years later, I started doing a sports stats and Ranger Report, which was a newsletter that came out every 2 weeks during the season. And I did that for 5 years. And then I moved on to the Blue Shirt Bulletin and then Inside Hockey. And then when I retired, I kind of just wanted to write down my memories of the Emil Francis era. And that turned into a book called We Did Everything But Win. And I was thrilled to be able to talk to Emil and call up all these players who I had grown up watching. And it was just a fabulous thing to do. And that led into Guardians of the Goal. And now it's led into this one, Forgotten Blue Shirts.
What did you learn from about Frank in writing the book?
Oh, well, he had at that time they had war service teams, which some players, they didn't actually fight in battle. They played on war service teams, and in an effort to keep the country's morale up in the United States and in Canada. And he had the opportunity to form a really powerhouse team using players from all over the league, and he was going to be their coach. And then right as that was happening, he actually got a call from Lester Patrick saying that the NHL is going to play. So at that time, he had a choice of staying with this powerhouse war team, or going back to the Rangers, who he knew were going to be decimated by the war. And he felt loyalty towards Patrick, and he went back to the Rangers, and he stayed there through the bad times. So he made do with what he had, and he persevered. He hit stone walls, but he made it through. He kept the Rangers relevant and afloat for all those years, and he kept people in the stands, and you have to hand it to him. He was really a great asset to the organization.
As a Ranger fan, that his career was way before my time, and Emil Francis was when I was growing up a Ranger fan.
Right.
What are the differences and what are the similarities between the two men?
Well, they both had a plan on what they wanted to do. I mean, they both knew how they wanted to run the Rangers. They both instituted innovations into the league and into the way the Rangers played the game, and they both did the best they could with what they had. Like I said with Boucher, Emil Francis is the one that got them to play their home playoff games at the Garden, because before that, if the Rangers had any home playoff games, they had to play them on the road, and because of Ringling Brothers coming in with the Elephant
Circuit. Yes.
So, but Amos told Bill Jennings when he was offered the job as general manager, he said, "I'm not going to take his job unless you find a way to let us have our home games our home playoff games at Madison Square Garden." So they came up with some kind of a sheeting that went between the floor of the Garden and the dirt from the circus, and they could keep the ice frozen underneath there, and they had playoff games like that. Sometimes it started at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, because the circus had to get their 2 or 3 performances in every day during Easter.
the guy who cleans up after the elephants has to do his thing too.
Yeah.
So when I was a kid, I'd go to games, maybe a Knicks game. I can't remember if it was the Knicks during the day and the Rangers at night. And we just stayed there and watched them change the floor. And that was incredibly fascinating to me. And we're also, the ushers wanted everybody out and resell tickets. So we would evade the ushers for 2 or 3 hours. And good memories of that. This is the old garden we're talking about, folks.
That's right.
And it had all of the tradition, I would say, of Boston Fenway Park, that type of thing. It's just when you go in there, when you went in there, they had life-size portraits of the Knicks and the Rangers all over the wall, and you'd see Larry Cahan. Well, no, but you'd see Carl Braun and Andy Bathgate and Dean Prentice. It was just a delight to be in. It had the cigar smoke. The flavor of the garden was the gamblers would be in the lobby, Nedick's would be right next door.
That's right.
And the smell of all of that, you could go in the garden, in the lobby of the garden, once you're in, and the players would use the restrooms. And I had a memory that when I said that, I had a memory of the night that it's not hockey, but Carl Braun became the Knicks coach.
Okay.
And I saw him in the lobby that night. He was a player coach, if I'm not mistaken, and he had his uniform on. He was going to the men's room. I said, Carl, good luck to you. And he was absolutely grumpy. I mean, I'm sure he had nothing else to do but talk to some 14-year-old kid. But that was my end of rooting for Carl Braun. On the other hand, as you know, I had some wonderful interactions, getting autographs, talking to people. Jean Rattel comes to mind, and Val Fontaine, who signed a Ranger Blue Book for me. And I asked him, would you do me a favor if I gave you my address? Would you go into the locker room? They didn't call it a locker room, into the room, dressing room or whatever, and have all the Rangers sign it. I had what's known as chutzpah, guts, to ask. He was so sweet. He says, sure. And sure enough, a couple of weeks later, comes back the Ranger Blue Book from Val Fontaine, signed everybody, but I think it was Marcel Paillet.
Yeah. I have it now. You actually mailed it to me a couple of years ago.
Right.
Appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate your having it. Nice that you do. Let's talk now about whatever you want to talk about. You're a podcast for yourself. What comes to mind?
Oh, well, the fact that I'm self-publishing this book, I had sent this book actually, I've been working on it off and on for about 3 years. Okay, I got about halfway through, and I kind of lost my focus on what I wanted it to be. So I got involved with this nut job podcaster working on a baseball book of all time, and we did that for about a year.
That job really understates it. You're a wordsmith. You could do better than that. How about
we're on the public airways, yeah. So we got involved with that, and I learned a little bit about self-publishing, and then once we got finished with the baseball book, which is called The Comfortable Zone in a Batter Pine Tar, I went back to the hockey book, and I figured out where I wanted the book to go, and then it sat on my publisher's desk from almost a year. He never did anything with it, so I said screw that. So I decided to self-publish, and I got some good people behind me. My editor is Ken Samuelson, who edited my Emil Francis book, and I got Rob Stragenborg, who is doing the cover and putting it on Kindle for me, and it's close to going.
And you got a forward by one of your
by Stan Fisher. Yes, okay.
That makes all the difference in one's head. We did our book. We got Peter Golenbach and Mark Latino, and we felt one of them said, I think it was Peter Golenbach, said brilliant in describing it. What else did we need for our heads? We knew that it was going to be okay. Yeah. And Stan Fischler, tell me about Stan and your meeting him and your knowing him.
Well, it's funny. When I was writing the Emil Francis book, We Did Everything But Win. When it came out, he had one of his interns call me up and interview me for his newsletter. He was doing his own private newsletter at the time. And, that went okay. And then I sent him a copy of the book once it was published. And on a Saturday afternoon, the phone rings, and it's Stan Fischler. And I thought to myself, shit. And he said, George, I got your book, and I have a big problem with it. I said, what's that? He said, well, it's much too short. I could read it for another 200 pages. So, and since then, we've been, I email him, I call him. I've contributed to some of his columns. He was a great resource for this Frank Boucher book, because I didn't live through this era, but he did. So anytime I had a question about something, I'd get a hold of him, and he would answer it, and he would give me a quote, and that was fantastic. So, and then he wrote the foreword to this book. He wrote the foreword to Guardians of the Gold too. So, it's nice to have friends in high places. I just want this. I can tell you, the only thing about Stan is I wish he was in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Believe it or not, he's not in the Hockey Hall of Fame. And
I can imagine a sport that doesn't honor the journalists that honors the sport. Yeah. And he has done more just by his writing to call attention to that league than anyone you could think of. There's some inequities in the Hockey Hall of Fame. I remember we did a Retro Ranger show a while back, you and I, on the Hockey Hall of Fame. Do you remember what that instance was about? people
Well, we probably talked about
equipment.
Stan, and we probably talked about somebody like Dean Prentice is not in the Hockey Hall of Fame, and Davy Kerr, the Ranger goalie from the '40s, is not in the Hockey Hall of Fame. And there's a lot of guys who should be there, but they're not. And it's all politics, basically. And it's a shame.
Right. What's Stan like personally?
Very nice man. Very, very, very nice man. He's a good guy to know. I mean, he'll kid around with you. He'll remember things that you told him a while ago. We talk about old movies. We talk about old hockey players, of course. He was a big Brooklyn Dodger fan, and we talk about that, and just a very nice man. He's not what some people might think of him. He might, in his younger days, he might have been he might have come off as a little gruff or something. But he's a very nice man. He's a family man. He's got 2 sons. He's living in Israel now. He's very proud of his grandchildren. One of them is going to be playing junior hockey in Pennsylvania with the Hershey Bears club, not the AHL club, but their like junior club, and he gets around. He's supposed to be coming to the New York area next month. He's going to be honored in the New York State Hockey Hall of Fame up in Troy, New York, in July sometime. So nice. Hope you can get him, and on the podcast we'll do a show about Brooklyn. We've threatened to do that for a long time, and circumstances haven't allowed it. What are you hoping for with the book? Oh, I hope that it sells a lot of copies. No,
okay.
No. I'm hoping that people read it and they like it. I mean, the book about the Emil Francis era, We Did Everything But Win. Anybody who read that book and lived through that era loved the book. I still get comments on Facebook or on Twitter or emails from people who read the book, and they say things like, that's a book that I could have written, but you didn't. But
you didn't, and I did.
Yeah, but that book really struck a chord with a lot of people my age, our age, and I'm hoping that this will too. The unfortunate thing is that it's the era before that, and a lot of people might not remember it, might not have been around, but it's a good history book for the Rangers, and they have a 100th anniversary coming up in 2026. So I'm hoping that it'll come in handy for people when that happens.
Beautiful. George, it's always a pleasure talking to you. You know that. I want to wish your wife good luck. She has a little eye surgery coming up.
Thank you.
And on behalf of everybody here, and it's not pleasant, but doable for you guys. And I want to thank you for contributing to the network and my life, and the book we wrote together was fun doing, and
we had a good time writing it.
And we got a lot of people who liked it. We've done many podcasts, people who have been in the book, people who criticized the book, good, bad, or indifferent. Somebody told us we got some great criticism, and it was Joseph Dorrington, and we took it as a compliment that he was reading the book.
Well, the thing that got me about that when we had him on a couple of weeks ago is that he quoted the page number and the instance where we got something wrong. And I think that's great because that actually showed that he read the book and he made a note that, this was wrong. It isn't just saying, no, you had something wrong there. No, he narrowed it down, it was great.
Yeah, I don't even remember what it was, but it was minuscule anyway. And just talking to people like Joseph Dornson about a book that we wrote, that is satisfaction for an author that can't be quantified, it doesn't translate to money earned. It just translates to how you feel about what you're doing and how you feel about yourself. Right. And thank you, George, for being in my life.
No problem, Ralph. As the book too. It all depends on why you write the book. Of course, everybody wants to make money, but you also want to share your knowledge, and you also want to be able to look at it and say, I did that, and that's a big thing, I'll
walk by my bookcase sometime and just stare. Yeah. I go, whoa, that's all you can say, and the fun of doing it. That's it. Can't be replaced.
Well, I remember when the Emil Francis book came out, I got a box of books from the publisher, and I opened it up, and there was about 10 or 15 books in there, I guess, and I didn't want to pick any of them up. I just looked at them. I just, wow, that's something. I did that.
Yeah. And you did. Thank you, George. Thank you for listening, everybody. Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. George Grimm was my guest, and I'm Ralph Tycho, kind of the weak link of it all, but I persevere. Hey.
The Crazy Nut Job podcast.
Yes, and I enjoy that so much. Thank you again, George. Talk soon, everybody. Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, Ralph Tycho, and adios and
Bye-bye.
Happy trails.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned Network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.